Should we get started?
It's your show.
5:35.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
All right, Jaime.
Okay, well, hello everybody. It's good to see everybody here this evening. My name is Jaime Pippo. I am a high school English and math teacher in Ottawa, and I'm excited to be here and facilitate this session with Alicia and Will today, and Peter.
All right, I'm Alicia Burdess. I'm an assistant principal right now, learning some new ropes, I guess. Missing teaching a lot, missing kids a lot because our kids just got sent home. So we don't have students in the building anymore. I'm in Grand Prairie, Alberta. And yeah, I'm super excited. I was telling Peter earlier that basically he has made me a lot of new friends. I'm very grateful. And I'm very grateful for all of you guys showing up to learn from each other. And Will has lovingly, graciously said that he would help us host this and help us with all of the technology and the random groups and the conversations.
Yeah, hello everyone again. I really am going to try and be as not present as possible. This is definitely Alicia's and Jaime's thing, but I'll try my best to try and make things happen, you know, in terms of the technology. So I'm excited for this, and thank you, Alicia and Jaime, for being willing to be the contributors tonight.
No problem. All right, let's get started. So we just have a couple of pictures, just kind of showing you what some of our thinking classroom experiences have looked like. We're going to dive right in. We want you guys to experience a rich task firsthand. So we are going to try to do it online style since we are all having to experiment and experience that a little bit these days. So this will be kind of our take on what it could look like online. We know you'll be patient with us as we try to do this. So first things first, we are going to solve a problem. So if you want to close your eyes for a minute, because this takes a little bit of visualization. So I want you to imagine that you have 16 kids in your classroom. And there can be some more, but you only need 16 right now. Everybody else can kind of be around the outside of your classroom looking in. In the middle of your classroom, I need you to set up a grid of 16 students. So a 4x4 grid. They need to fill in that grid. So 4 rows of 4 kids. And if you have managed to do that in your head, congratulations, you have solved the first problem. I say the same thing to my kids or adults who are doing this problem. It takes a little bit and it's really funny to watch. Okay, so now what you're gonna do, now once you have those 16 kids in a 4x4 grid, you are going to ask the person in the front left to step out, leaving an empty space. So that front kid in the leftmost corner of your grid is going to step out. Now I ask the back kid. So in your brain, imagine that back kid in the opposite corner. So the back right corner has to move to that empty space. So we need to get that back corner, that back right corner to move to the empty space in the front left corner. Now they can only move forwards, backwards, left or right. So they can only move vertically or horizontally. They cannot move diagonally, and they can only move into an empty space. Okay, it's okay if you're missing pieces because you're going to have the rest of your group to help you fill in the pieces. We are also going to provide you with some virtual manipulatives. Once you're in your random group, you may want to run and get some Shreddies, some Cheerios. If your math teacher's and you're at home already and you have manipulatives, you can grab some manipulatives. We do have virtual manipulatives as well though. So I'm gonna say it one more time just in case I cut out. You have a grid of 4x4 kids. There is an empty space in your front left corner. Diagonally to the rear of that, so in your back right corner, that kid has to get to that empty space. He or she can only move forwards or backwards or left or right, and they can only move into an empty space. How many moves can you do it in? Okay, random group, have fun. We will be popping in and seeing how you guys are doing. All right, so how do you guys feel about the problem?
There was more to
It
it
was
than it
super
looked like
fun.
at first.
Yeah. So what we'll do is we're just going to discuss a little bit. I'm not sure if everyone had a chance to discuss the questions. There were definitely some challenges. This is the first time that I've been in this situation with this many people in this many breakout rooms trying to work on the same task. I don't know if you guys had a chance to really think about, what did you notice about the task specifically? If you just want to add to the chat, anything that you noticed about the task, anything that you noticed about you as a learner, anything that you noticed about the teacher or the teachers, and anything that you noticed about the experience in general. So let's just see if we can just type something that you noticed in the chat. I have to find my chat. So just take a few minutes, add something to the chat, look and see what everybody else is writing. I like the comment that somebody had come in late and was able to join in. That happens so often in a classroom. Kids show up late, and the fact that the task was strong enough that they could join in is a very valid, good point. Physical manipulatives are awesome for this problem. It's another good point. Human beings are amazing for this problem. The best manipulative, once you're a human being in the problem, then moving on to the little plastic square tiles we found were really good. Or some people use shreddies or mini wheats. Yeah, the task made us having to keep pushing ourselves to figure out how to move forward and navigate the process. There kind of wasn't an end to it, unless we didn't make it to your room in time to give you a good hint or a good extension. One of the groups said, well, what if it was a rectangle? What if it wasn't a square? So there's always somewhere to go. So that's another quality of a good task, is that high ceiling, that there's always somewhere else to move on to. In a real classroom, when you can see the kids at the vertical surfaces, it's really easy to pinpoint who needs the next hint or who next extension, who's getting frustrated and needs a little bit of support, who's off task and needs some motivation, or who is ready for the next extension. What do you think, Jamie?
Yeah, I also liked the comment started off, we started to take off and then drop down to a 2x2 grid and a 3x3 grid. You were able to extend to a 5x5 and a 6x6 to test different expressions that you were coming up with. So that autonomy, like, you really didn't need anybody to come into the room, and that just all happened, which was lovely to see. Yeah, great. Thank you, guys. That was awesome.
One of the things that Jamie and I had talked about earlier was also giving you guys the opportunity. And I know some people took the opportunity, so you must have some thinking classroom experience. Obviously, there's a lot of people with thinking classroom experience here, but by toggling through the other people's Jamboards, you could see how they organize their information, what strategies they might be using, what visual cues they might have going on their Jamboard. So that's another thing that we would encourage, and that's that mobility of knowledge, even in a virtual situation. And in a classroom setting, then, get the kids to go and walk around the room and look at other kids' whiteboard spaces. All right. Okay, if we look back at the screen here, kind of discuss some of those questions. I just have a little snippet here of kids.
Top corner. What's the least amount of moves you guys have done with? Okay. Guys, it should go crisscross. That's strange.
7, 8,
Yeah, crisscross.
9,
Then Mackenzie moves down.
11,
15. Keep it down. No, we're down. 19. 20, 21, 3.
popcorn.
There. Okay, on to the math. So just add to the chat. This is just going to be a chat box chat. Question 1, what math did you see in this task? So let's fill that chat. What math did you see in this task?
There's an interesting comment from Al here that says, I like when the tests end up linking to the curriculum, and although they all don't have to, and it's a good way to start the year, what could this task be linked to? Because I know Alicia has done it with younger kids. I did it in a grade 9 class, and with grade 10 students. So what math could this task be linked to here? I did, Nella. I took them outside. My grid was huge because they were all spaced out, but we did do it Friday, and we came back to it today, actually.
I was watching out a window on the 3rd floor, and I was like, what is she doing? And I was like, I really want to go downstairs.
This is like a common question people ask in my room, I think. What is she doing?
And then let's jump to question 3. How could you use this problem to help build your thinking classroom? So forget about the curriculum for a moment in terms of the concepts. What about competencies or other skills? You know, the most important stuff. Yeah, relationships, collaboration, communication, getting everyone involved, reasoning.
Yeah, I think that's important too, because we always say, oh, students learn better collaboratively, but if you don't give them a task that really demands collaboration, you're not giving that opportunity to develop it. So the right task will foster that.
Yeah, when you have 24 students in a grid and 6 students around the perimeter of the grid, bossing them around and pointing things out, it's a pretty amazing thing to see.
Yes, Al, I love that. The
Yes,
jumping
Alex.
frog.
Right into a quadratic pattern. All right.
So I'm going to jump in for just a second and say, I feel like you've covered about a third of what you guys wanted to talk about. It has been an hour, and I'm okay with whatever anyone wants to do, but these things typically run an hour. I will leave it up to the contributors and the attendees to make whatever decisions they feel are best, but just throwing that out there.
So if anyone leaves, we won't be offended. Right, Jamie?
No, we won't be offended.
Okay,
We get it. We get it.
Just a few more little things to show you guys, and then we're gonna have a little question and answer time.
My brain's actually melting. Yeah.
So that guy said, my brain is actually melting. And that was after solving a problem with the group. Can you guys hear the sound okay? Yeah.
go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just to move that.
Yeah, I know, but all together. It's practically like that in a way.
Yeah, but
Who said I was drawing it correctly?
no, but the answer
The answer?
right there. Because
No, we counted every move.
no,
we did.
for the space. We have to move the space. And we have to count the space moving.
Wait, what?
So those guys argued for quite a while. This is grade 6. So I've done this task, grade 4 all the way up to grade 12, and kids will amaze you every single time when they're given the opportunity. These guys argued for like 20 minutes, and I think at the end they realized that they were both actually saying the same thing, but they were figuring out how to communicate and how to solve this problem together. So the next piece after all of this beautiful collaborative problem solving is to get them to tell me the story of how your group solved the problem. I have never seen more inspiring, beautiful art, as I like to call it. Some of these things I want to frame and put up in my house. These are just some examples, and I'm sure you guys have many others of things that kids have created. These are all grade 8 or grade 9 student examples, just because that's where I spend most of my time. But when you look at it, you can't tell me that those kids didn't learn something during this experience. These are from different problems. They're just some of my favorite just because they're so visually appealing. They don't all look like this, but after I collect exemplars from year after year and I show them to the kids, then they realize how creative they can be with their math communication. They amaze me every single time they write up a new problem solving solution. They keep them in their portfolios and they watch their own progression from the beginning to the end. And it's powerful to see what kids know and what kids can communicate mathematically. And this is just showing some of the math that comes out of the problem that you guys all just worked on. All right, Jaime, do you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, this was just another task. This is from, well, a long time ago now, like maybe 6 years ago. I was teaching grade 8 at the time. And so I don't know if you're familiar with this all aboard train puzzle, but it has 12 pieces of a train. Well, we can show maybe just the first minute to explain the task, and then we'll stop it.
And it's a nice video of a thinking classroom in action as well.
I have a puzzle that I got for my son, and this is called the All Aboard for an Unforgettable Ride puzzle, all aboard train puzzle, okay? So if you open it up, you'll notice that there's 12 pieces to create a train. Okay, so the back of the box reads, kids won't believe their eyes as they assemble the colorful pieces of this one-of-a-kind train puzzle. Kids will adore the imaginative art and quirky characters on both sides of each puzzle piece, making it possible to arrange the train in countless ways. What's your question? Hillary?
How many times can you arrange the train?
How many ways can you arrange the train?
Countless.
Yeah. Nice try, but no. So you're going to work in your groups that have your cards right now. And I have enough puzzles for most groups. Some groups might have to work together if you want to see the puzzle. I do strongly recommend that you start off building your puzzle to see how this puzzle works. Okay, so build a couple of trains to see how this puzzle works. Any questions? Okay, go ahead.
So I think we can pause it, but this is a grade 8 group of all,
I wonder if organizing our work
on, I have
can
to
help
figure out
us
how to
break
pause it.
this apart a little bit more.
There we go.
so just like, a grade 8, this is, they're not streamed into any different pathways here. And they worked on this task actually at the very end of this video. The bell goes and no one moved. They all just wanted to like talk about the task some more. So it's just another example of a rich task in class. And you know, looking back, I still talked a little bit too long at the beginning, but didn't talk for the rest of it to the whole class. I think we, oh. So this question always definitely comes up. So where do we find rich tasks? And while we would love to like share a one-stop shop with you, we were wondering if everyone can in the chat just drop their favorite, some of their favorite places they go to find these tasks that they use in their classroom. And we can compile all the resources that you share with us.
And then after you've added your favorite, or more if you have more, because once you start looking, they just come everywhere. Everywhere you look, tasks will come at you. Then we'll have some time for questions and answers and discussion. You know, I've wanted to ask a whole bunch of you on here questions, so you better be ready.
So I think it's important to mention while they're putting those resources there that there's tasks, right? And then there's thinking tasks and not thinking tasks. Within the thinking task category, you can have curricular and non-curricular, but ultimately if they're getting the kids thinking, it's a good task. You know, you have to wrestle with, well, it doesn't always address my curriculum. I know that the administrator oversees my personal department is on. I particularly am more interested with students thinking than anything. If I can give them that, that's a gift. So make sure that the task you choose, whether it's curricular or non-curricular, still addresses students thinking and then never rob them of that opportunity.
All right, and then if anyone has a question for anyone, feel free to put it in the chat and we can spend a few minutes discussing questions that come up. Peter's here too, so if you have any questions for Peter, feel free.
Can you unshare the screen so that we can see each other?
Yes, I could definitely do that.
I just want to know what Peter thought about moving his own face around.
Me too.
I want to know who's the poor kid who was in Peter's group.
It was
nobody's owning that. Not me.
Does anyone want to share anything that has come up in their classroom? A win, a challenge, an inspirational story?
Thomas Broxterman just asked a question too that I think is in the chat that's worth addressing.
Yeah. So how do you balance thinking classroom and getting through the math concepts you need students to learn? So for me, I think it's really about taking time at the beginning and establishing, you know, course, a community of a classroom where this is going to be what it's like every day, and having students experience it with non-curricular tasks, non-intimidating tasks, and then moving towards curriculum-based tasks. And I still go back to non-curricular tasks pretty often, actually, especially now that classes are 2.5 hours long. I feel like it's a great way to kind of break up, you know, when you can feel that something is just, they need a break, but you don't want to just like send them away. I feel like these non-curricular tasks just bring everybody together, and especially, you know, like moving squares where it gets them moving, and So go back to non-curricular tasks often, but the day-to-day stuff is all tied to curriculum.
Yeah, and to add on to that, Peter once told me that you can teach most everything through problem solving, and then at the end of the day, they'll learn the curriculum really quickly because they already have their thinking. So, you know, once you have those classroom norms set, once you've built your thinking classroom, the curriculum stuff comes way faster and at a deeper level and easier because the kids are thinking and they're used to thinking and they have confidence in their skills, and the teacher has confidence in the fact that the kids are going to think. So, you know, you can teach the rest of the curriculum concepts, you know, once you have that established class. And also once you're like, you know what, I just don't have any more big, beautiful problems. Anything can then become, you know, a thinking task. And then you move on to, you know, thin slicing and progressing from something simple and adding a little layer of complexity every time and getting through some of your curricular pieces. I mean, at this point now, I can put up a PAT practice question on the whiteboard, put them in random groups and get them working on that. And the discussion and the thinking and the arguing that comes out of that is amazing to see. So it's almost like once you flip that switch and you turn your classroom into a thinking classroom, you can keep doing what you've done and it will just come more naturally, and kids will be working better together and making more of those links.
And I think that's an important, I don't want people to think there's thinking classroom and then curricular learning, like these are two different worlds. I mean, the whole point is when you get the kids thinking, the curricular stuff falls under this umbrella of a kid who can think now and will tackle the curricular stuff, because the curricular stuff can be good and worthwhile too. So don't think it's just like the fun stuff and then math. Like, no, the fun stuff is the math, but you got to get these kids in a mindset where like exploring that math is itself fun, and that math is often represented in the standards of the curriculum. So, but that said, you do tend to have to start with the non-curricular tasks first to get them in that mindset, to flip that switch that Alicia was talking about. And once that's flipped, it's a matter of maintaining through the curricular stuff, which is eminently doable. But don't think it's the thinking stuff and then the curricular stuff. They are the same world. It's just how you train the students to be in that world.
That's a really good point. There's a question there just about the online stuff. I don't have good answers. So anyone else in the room that has experience doing more of the thinking classroom online, this was our kind of first attempt at it. But feel free to share and jump in, please, if you have any other advice on doing it online.
I just finished teaching 2 weekends of online classes, and some of the teachers are in the room here. Maybe they can talk a little bit about what online thinking classroom looks like.
Yes. Feel free to name them. Breakout rooms, Jamboards, Google Slides.
I think, so I'm one of those students, and Peter's done a great job kind of easing us into it. He led us into it with a lot of playing with the tools. So giving us a chance to have a fool around in a play and to get used to using Jamboard and things like that before diving into the tasks. And he's found a lot of tasks that have worked well, if not better, online rather than in person even. And we're very lucky, we have a smaller group than you have here tonight. So that definitely helps that Peter is able to jump around to us. I think one thing that we haven't mentioned here is Peter also keeps he calls it the knowledge feed, where there's a Google Doc that we all have the link to. And so if he hasn't had a chance to jump into, that's where you can go to put a question into or to look for the next extension, is often on that knowledge feed there.
Cool. Thank you for sharing. There was a question about your experience switching over to a thinking classroom and parent-student pushback. Yeah, it's there. It all happened. Challenging. Sometimes I would just shut my door and just keep doing what I was doing. It really helps if you have a community of people doing it with you. It really helps when you have people that you can ask questions to. I found the less information I gave to parents, the better. Because if I gave them too much information, they just had way more questions. Whereas if I just did it and the kids went home and told them about it, if the kids were happy about it, it ended up being really good. Some of the pushback I got was about, why don't you use textbooks, and why aren't they coming home with homework every night and practice questions? I was like, well, they can. I can gladly supply them with some practice questions from textbooks. That was one of the biggest things. They didn't think that I was teaching curriculum because the kids were having fun in math. So it did take some conversations with colleagues, potentially, or I would just close my door. It took some conversations with my admin. And definitely with my students as well, explaining to them, why we're doing it, why it's so important. Jamie, did you want to add to that part?
Yeah, I agree. My experience was much the same. And I think the biggest kind of pushback or resistance I had from students were those who always excelled with math before thinking classroom. So students who really excelled at just, watching the teacher take notes and then mimicking what the teacher was doing. So all students who flourished with that resisted the thinking classroom, but they do for sure come around. And I think it's safe to say that even they realize that their experience is much more enjoyable when they're up and collaborating and working on these rich tasks. And they're proud of themselves. Yeah. You can see that they're proud of themselves for sure.
And the students buy in, and the community builds to the point where it would never, ever go back.
Once they trust you, it's all fine. I moved to a new school about 5 years ago, and nobody knew who I was. So I had a lot of parent meetings, and it was probably around the 5th parent meeting when I realized, like, I can't keep this up. Like, I have 200 parents. So I invited all the parents in for meet the teacher night. And I did 2 sessions with, groups of 30 different groups of parents, and they went swimmingly. Like I basically ran it like a Peter workshop, where I put them into random groups. We did tasks, and we talked about, what thinking classrooms were all about. And that was the end of it. I never heard a single utterance of a concern or a complaint after that. So I think as soon as they understand, and putting them in that situation really helps them understand. But even when I was having parent meetings, as soon as they understand that you're coming from a good place, and that these aren't just wing nutty ideas, then they get on board pretty quickly. It's just that they're quite often hearing things on soccer fields, or they're hearing complaining students coming home grumpy after school because things are now different. So you just have to change that message.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael. Alex has a funny parent story, Peter says.
Is Alex still here?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Hi,
I'm not going to turn my my video on because I've been having trouble with my internet. But it's a pretty good story. I had a kid who said, "Yeah, my parents want to meet you. They never go to parent-teacher interviews, but they're very curious about what I'm telling them about class." And so they came in, and they were both psychologists. And I started talking about flow and the model, and right away they said the guy's name, which I can never remember. And immediately the interview was over. And like after that, as soon as they realized what I was doing, the interview was over in like a minute. They were like, "Oh, that's great." And they walked away.
That's awesome.
It's Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, if I recall correctly, and it's gonna be the password to the next session, I think. So.
Spelled correctly.
Yeah.
All right. Well, there's a question about thin slicing. Peter does talk about it in his book. I looked it up, page 155, 156. Peter, do you want to just briefly describe what thin slicing is? And then I think maybe, Will, that could be another session if there are people that want to step up and run it.
Yeah, I think it's great.
So thin slicing this is all based in chapter 9, where exactly the story that Alex was talking about, which is the idea of flow, which is synonymous to engagement. And it comes from a Hungarian psychologist by the name of Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. It just rolls off the tongue, and it's spelt exactly the way it sounds. Except there is a random Z in there that you never remember where it belongs. And he had this idea that in order for students to be engaged, there has to be a really nice balance between their ability and the challenge of the task they're engaged in. And he represented this on a graph. But this balance is paramount. And the problem is that in a dynamic setting like a classroom, the balance keeps getting thrown off. Because as students work on things, their ability increases, and now you have to find a way to increase the challenge to keep that balance in place. And that works really well. Like the task we did tonight was an example of that. It was, we started with one grid, and then when we had our ability increased, we moved it to a bigger grid or a smaller grid, depending on which way we wanted to go. So we were sort of self-regulating this. But the reason we stayed engaged for so long was there was always a balance between our ability and the challenge of the task. And then we talked about algebra or linear relations, and we were playing with in that space. Thin slicing is what happens when we move this idea of maintaining this balance over to a curriculum set of tasks. So rather than solving how do we move the colored picture of Peter, we start factoring quadratics, completing the square, adding decimals, doing 1- and 2-step algebra, whatever it is. But we sequence the tasks as very slight increases in challenge, so that as their ability grows, we're always able to increase their challenge and keep them in that balance. It's a good read, those pages that Alicia gave you. You'll laugh, you'll cry, it'll become
155, 156. All right, everyone. Jaime, any final words?
Thank you, everyone, for tonight and participating and asking questions and sharing resources. We'll compile those and look to Will with how to get them out to everybody.
Happily, and
putting faces to names. Thank you so much for everyone for coming.
And thank you, Alicia and Jaime, for putting this together. Really appreciate it. I always like when teachers can work with other teachers.
Thank you, Will. Thanks for teaching us how to.
Yeah, thank you, Will.